that they win over Wales in Cardiff, but it was far tighter than many had anticipated, with Warren Gatland's departure seeing Wales have a new manager bump under Matt Shard as they came mightily close to toppling Simon Easterby's side on Saturday afternoon. Welcome to the Left Wing Podcast. Will Slattery here with you, and I'm delighted to be joined for our weekend debrief by Luke Fitzgerald and Rúaidhrí O'Connor. And Rúaidhrí, I'll go to you first, given you were in Cardiff, you got to see it up close and personal. Why ultimately do you think the game was as close and as enthralling as it turned out to be? Like, no one had mapped it, no one had forecast it. There was the idea that Wales would be better with, a few changes, a good number of changes to the team, but they, for long periods, put Ireland under all sorts of pressure until a really strong kind of bench impact saw Simon Easterby's side home. What's your kind of takeaways from why the game played out the way it did?
Yeah, I guess it was a reminder that games take on a life of their own, and we can predict all we like, but once you get two teams into an arena like that, with a crowd like that, and when the crowd were just dying to have something to get behind after months and years of misery, that when things go their way, it can flip. So I think there's a couple of factors behind it. Obviously, there's the stuff that everyone's talking about, that Wales had a better selection. Pick players in the right positions, pick combinations from the regions. All Scarlet's back three, the Cardiff and Gloucester players marrying up in the kind of in the pack. Sorry, not in the pack, in the back line at half back and stuff like that. The coach obviously gave them a very clear plan. They bought into it. I think we can see now that they lost faith in Gatland, and they were just, whatever energy that they had was being drained, and this change gave them a lot of energy back. But Ireland played their part too, and there's been a bit of a habit in this window of Ireland going missing in games. It happened maybe the last 10 minutes against England, most notably in and around half time in Murrayfield, when they let the 17 lead get back to 17, wasn't it 17-10? And when that happened in Cardiff, the Welsh fans, who were just desperate to get behind something, just suddenly full of life, full of energy, and the team just bounced off that, and those combinations that we talked about, they started finding holes in Ireland's defence, and finding exploiting issues that maybe we didn't realize were there, or they'd obviously identified and had seen, but other teams hadn't been able to find. So it became this kind of sleeper classic, and obviously the red card is another factor that kind of is all part of it as well. And you throw all those things in the mix, and with half an hour to go, Ireland are 8 points down and have to find a way to win. And what makes it, it became an incredibly interesting exercise and scenario they probably never would have built for themselves. Get back from 8 points down with one of your centres sent off. They're blessed that there was a 20-minute red card, and they found a way, which made it a really good Irish win in the end. Not a great Irish performance, but with 7 changes, again, another factor, the bit of kind of cohesion that Ireland maybe lacked. There was like all those things went into the mix, and we got like a sleeper classic.
Yeah, I think Sleeper Classic is a good way of putting it. Like, no one would have predicted it was going to be such an entertaining game, and maybe not like an all-time great Six Nations game or anything like that, but certainly, as you say, the roof being closed, that cauldron that we've come to associate with Cardiff on a good Six Nations day, we're all present. Like, yeah, you touched on a few things there, like Matt Shard coming in, and it wasn't just some sort of mythical new manager bounce. He made important changes to the team to get them back to what we might come to expect. Like 3 changes in the front row. They had a really dominant scrummaging performance, picking an actual out half, and Gareth Anscombe not only gave the team maybe a more structure and a focal point, but allowed Ben Thomas to play in a really in his more natural position, and he played really well. And then Max Llewellyn alongside him, putting Ellis Mee in on the wing, a 21-year-old, rookie from this season with the Scarlets, I thought he put himself about and was really good too. So Matt Shard deserves a lot of credit. And then, as you say, the players stepping up, kind of really indicating that maybe, as you say, the Gatland era had really definitely run its course, because it was a surprise when he left. Luke, anything you want to add to what Rudd said just initially in terms of, things that stood out to you about Ireland's fight back or the manner at which Wales took the game to Ireland?
I suppose I better start somewhere positive if online is if the online chatter is anything to go by. I thought how they controlled the game when they were in trouble at the very end, I thought was brilliant. I think we always get asked, all the Indo crew get asked to put together a couple of lines on what we think will be the outcome of the match, and I kind of always hate it because it's such a difficult thing to have a scoreline prediction, but I really, the one thing I did say is I thought the bench would get them to where I thought they needed to get to. Whether that was in a tight match they get them over the line, and if we were ahead, I thought we'd really pull ahead with what we got from the bench. I think they've been so good so far. If you think about all the games so far in the competition, what's really stood out is Ireland's bench impact. They've been brilliant, and hopefully that injury to Conan isn't too bad because he has been chief instigator there, hasn't he? He's been so good. And Bundy on the weekend was brilliant as well. I mean, he's so physical. But even the guys on the pitch, like I thought Prendergast was quite good, but I thought Gibson Park, some of his kicking when Ireland were under pressure was brilliant. Like even because I wasn't sure about some of those penalty decisions, guys, when they were kind of in, like it didn't take them beyond a converted try. But that one that kind of put them was at 6 points ahead. I was thinking, oh, I don't know if I'd go to the corner here, maybe just even eke some time. Um, but when the brilliant kick from Prendergast, in fairness, and then Gibson Park puts in some brilliant box kicks, either out of play or very deep in good positions. And even some of the ones when he was in the attacking part of the pitch, he'd one from the middle of the pitch that kind of went into the 22, could have put the pressure back on Wales. I just thought he was brilliant when it really, really mattered. He really showed his class. And as I said, those bench guys were brilliant. Alongside Baird is probably another worth an honourable mention as well. I thought he had a really, really good game. So very, very positive on that front. And you can see, like, Ireland are just such a tough team, aren't they? I can't think of any higher praise for a team. I just love that. It's the best trait to have is just to be hard to beat, even when the chips are down. And you could see that, over the last couple of years. Saw it in South Africa in the summer, saw it against Scotland a couple of years ago. We mentioned that because obviously, last week it was mentioned when we were over in Murrayfield. This team just can find a way to win, I think, when they're under pressure. So I love that about the team. To go back to maybe some realistic stuff, and we have to talk about some of the negatives because, I think the Gary Ringrose one, I think very lucky, as Rhodes alluded to. I got a lot of stick over the weekend for saying, I think, I'm not sure I love how out of control he is sometimes coming into the contact areas. He gets some brilliant hits. I just think it's quite dangerous, and for himself, he's had a few injuries himself, a few knocks, but also with other people. I just think that one in my mind has been coming for a while, Will, and that was nearly like while Ireland were under the pressure a little bit at that point. You still felt that, when they were going to turn it on or they showed a bit of accuracy with 15 on the pitch, they were definitely the better team. And that nearly had a massive impact on the game. If they had to play 14 for the rest of the match, I don't think they'd have won that game. Honestly, I don't think they would have. So that's a big moment. I thought the scrum probably needs a mention. I don't know what was like. I wish I knew more about it. I don't know whether it was the young guys in there, but it looked like he was pinging Porter. So that was kind of a disappointing element, and it was one of the areas where Ireland, I think, in test match rugby, you just want that set piece, just to be as solid as possible. You don't have to get it every time. There's always going to be marginal calls in there, but that kind of, it brought the crowd into the game. It got the Welsh team a bit of belief. They were getting, I think they might have had 4 penalties in a row at one stage there. And I was thinking, God, this isn't great. The referee's seeing something here. It's not like Porter's going to be pulled off, that kind of way. Like he's going to be staying on for 70, 75. So that was a worrying element. And I think, I think Wales probably deserve a bit of credit too. I actually thought they played, they came to play, and I thought they actually did quite well at times. They dealt with Ireland's pressure defense quite well. I think Ireland will learn a little bit about some of the moves that they put in place. I was really impressed with some of the positions and some of the finishing as well from the Welsh team when they got in good positions. I thought their shape was an awful lot better and quite actually hard to defend against. Although I would say Ireland could do better there. So probably a bit of a combination of the two things. So they're the kind of initial thoughts outside of Rhodes. I mean, Rhodes had, I thought he really nailed most of the big issues there. And I do think the one thing about, test match rugby as well, mentality coming into the game. Like these are professional athletes. The margins, like a 30-point to 40-point win is a massive kind of margin. I think some people were kind of expecting that. Whereas like away from home, really difficult to do. And if people feel like they're up against the pump, they get a little positivity in training over the last couple of weeks. Ireland make a lot of changes, Rudd said. All those factors, I think probably played into what was, a way tighter test match than, if you think about, if you consider where the two teams are in their kind of life cycle, if you like. So loads to kind of unpack. I thought it was a brilliant game. The Millennium, I mean, it's not that often it serves up a bad game, is it? It's such a great place to play rugby. I mean, I'm jealous of you being there, Rhodes. It looked like an absolute belter of a game.
Yeah, well, they served up a few stinkers over that 14 match, or it was a 15 game losing run. But yeah, no, definitely, as you say, like,
Ah,
given it
but
was
entertaining though.
their
The
first home
crowd is. It's a
game,
great place to
their
play.
first home game of the window, that alone maybe would have sparked something. But between that, the changes that were made, and the new coach coming in, all contributed to it. Rod, let's just talk about the red card incident, because it was so had such a big bearing on the game. And like, I don't know what your thoughts are on it. Like, I think it really hammers home the farce that is the 20-minute red card rule. Like, Gary Ringrose flew in, as Luke said, out of control. Like, he's got that right a lot this season. He's put a serious hurt on a few guys over the course of the campaign, certainly in Leinster's colours. But got the timing wrong. Could have badly injured Ben Thomas. I think Wales win that period of 20 minutes 15-0. Then you have Bundy Aki being able to come on and replace Gary. Like, that's such a massive advantage to Ireland and to other teams who, commit similar mistakes. Like, you hear it often said that, like, oh, red cards can ruin spectacles. Like, the evidence for that to me is very flimsy. Like, I went back and looked. I think there's been 13 red cards in the Six Nations era that would have fallen under this 20-minute red card bracket, because they were for, like, head high shots rather than for, punches or kicks or elbows. Only 4 of those 13 occasions did the offending team end up getting beaten out the gate in a manner that would indicate the game was, quote unquote, ruined by a red card. The other 9 occasions, the games were still really competitive, decided in the final few minutes, and the red card did not in any way dilute the spectacle. So I think that narrative is pushed a lot by, like, disgruntled coaches, and some pundits as well kind of lean on it. But I there's no evidence for it in my mind from just looking at the numbers. And my memory of red cards in big games, World Cup final for one, Ireland, South Africa, going back a while with CJ Stander, another, that the games took on a life of their own and were still extremely entertaining. So the idea that this was necessary to save games from becoming ruined, I don't buy at all. No one can tell me that it's fair that the outcome that happened the weekend, that Gary Ringrose makes a bad decision, puts in a bad tackle, and Ireland are only penalised for 20 minutes. And Ireland outscore Wales 17-0 when they go back to 15 versus 15. In November, Semi Radradra against Wales, a really dangerous tackle on Cam Winnett, only gets sent off for 20 minutes. Fiji go back to 15. They outscore Wales 14-5 and win the game. Like, that's Wales have been shafted twice by this in the recent past, and I don't think the Six Nations needed to go down this route. Like, what did you make of the red card incident, the 20-minute red card generally, and how Ireland benefited from it?
Yeah, I know it doesn't make for great podcasting, but I pretty much agree with everything you said. And the IRFU do as well, because the IRFU are one of the people or one of the unions who tried to block this coming in. They're against the 20-minute red card as a concept because they think it undermines the message around player welfare. And I'm sure they weren't cursing it too much on Saturday night as they kind of the committee were celebrating it with their Welsh counterparts, but fundamentally, I think we see the flaws in in the laws, and Ireland benefited from it perversely on Saturday night. But like, it hasn't changed my mind. That's not going to make me think it's in any way a good rule. I think it's a silly change being driven for the wrong reasons, and it's going to benefit teams against Ireland in the future as well. Because Ireland have generally been very good with their discipline, particularly around high shots. In the last number of years. I mean, we have to go back to, wasn't it Bundy Aki laid on against England a couple of years ago. Prior to that, it was Peter O'Mahony in Cardiff. And to back your argument up, that day, Ireland had a kick to the corner to go up for a maul to maul the way over to the try, and unfortunately Billy Burns kicked it dead. But like, it's not as if they were beaten out the gate by a much better Welsh team in Cardiff that day. So I do think Ireland would have had a really good shot of winning the game on Saturday, albeit they performed pretty badly with 14 men. I think they would have probably put Bundy Aki on for probably Mac Hansen straight away if Ringrose had been given a straight red to solidify their midfield. That would have been a tactical call, whereas they waited for 20 minutes to bring him on once the red card period had elapsed this time. So I think they would have got more of a bounce off that. But if you take it that they lost that period 12-0 on Saturday and then won the rest of the game 17-0 with 15 men on the pitch. Sorry, 17-0 with 15 men on the pitch. The impact is all there for all to see. And like, Bundy Aki probably didn't. He possibly could be more subtle about his own impact. If they were trying to hide the fact that it worked out well for them, but he was like just the dominant personality of the match for half an hour. Like, it was arguably his best half an hour in an Ireland jersey, and it's a pretty impressive sample size you're picking from. And he was so charismatic about it as well. Like at one point towards the end, I don't think the cameras picked up on it. He did this kind of an incredible Hulk thing where he flexed his muscles and roared at the crowd into the side that we were on with the press box in it, and every Irish fan in the whole that side of the ground just like roared back at him, and it was like, you know, smeared in blood and black paint from the Guinness logo in the middle of the pitch. It was just yeah, they needed him to be a bit more covert about his influence, I think, to kind of deflect this as a topic. So, look, I don't think the 20-minute red card should exist. I'm pretty sure, looking at what Luke was talking about on social media and what he said already, he agrees. But he can't dispute that it worked in Ireland's favour on Saturday.
Yeah, but Liaki, I think it was because he had that knock to the face as well, so there's blood pouring. Like it really was. It made for some unbelievable photos, and just to reiterate, only 1/3 of the Six Nations red cards that would have fallen under this 20-minute red card rule contributed to games getting out of hand in a way that might be deemed like bad for spectators or whatever. And I don't even agree with that narrative, let alone the wider one. But so does something that happens only in 1/3 of red cards warrant bringing in this kind of rule? It's been driven by the Southern Hemisphere. So if they want to do it in the Rugby Championship and Super Rugby, let them. I don't see why, or even if it has to come in the autumn or the summer, but I don't know why the Six Nations needs to go down that path where it seems like some of the nations don't want to. Like, watching Super Rugby the last 2 weekends, I've already seen 20-minute red cards been brought in, and like just the commentary teams and the pundits are just talking such utter bullshit about it, like, and how it's necessary and warranted. It just is so at odds with what supporters want. I've never heard supporters in this part of the world be like, "Oh, the game was ruined." Like, the World Cup final was not ruined by that red card. Whether it was a red or not, you could argue the toss on it. It was kind of like one of those tough ones, but it was still a great game. And could New Zealand have won with 15 men? Probably, but it didn't make the spectacle any less. So that just doesn't hold any water for me. But yes, it is something that's been put forward as an argument for this thing. Luke, I suppose you had your say on social media about the incident about Gary's tackle technique, and you mentioned it earlier as well. Like, do you want to come in on anything that myself or Rudd have said?
Yeah, look, I just think it's just a bad rule. You know, we need to be careful. Like the Southern Hemisphere kind of dictating on this stuff. Like I presume people down there aren't taking cases against their unions around, concussion issues, because they just don't seem to be taking it seriously at all. You know, like one thing, like the thing about it is that, like, look, the argument for it is that there's some kind of ambiguity around some collisions, and I think they're not willing to make an error or two, or to be seen to be too harsh on someone and ruin the game, because, like, let's face it, their game is under pressure down there numbers wise, you know, whereas I think we seem to be doing quite well here, you know, and I'm surprised that we haven't seemed to been able to, you know, push our agenda a bit more than them. So yeah, look, I think it's a disappointing rule. I think it undermines lots of the good work that's been done in terms of trying to, you know, promote the game, keep it safe for people. Like, I don't think anyone here thinks that rugby's gone soft because, you're like, you've never been allowed to hit someone in the head. Like, so I don't know why now penalizing it has become such an issue. Um, you know, so look, yeah, I think I'm fairly clear on it. You know, in terms of Gary's stuff, I think it's probably worth commenting on that as well. Look, geez, I'm a massive Gary Ringrose fan. Like, I said that in the post, but I do think he's out of control going in there, Will. I think, like, when you're tackling, key thing with distributing power is actually really, unless you're a very big man, is getting your feet as close as possible to the person, because that's where the power is driven from, is your feet. Um, and or like, sorry, from your legs, but your feet obviously are key to that. And his feet are just so far away from people all the time. I just think he's really susceptible to kind of any late movement, any person that kind of changes their body shape late. And I think that's kind of what happened on the weekend. We've kind of seen it, like, he's got injured himself, but he's kind of injuring other people too. He's put himself in situations where, things could be yellow or a red card. It's obviously gone against him in this case. So I suppose I was making the case that I think he's probably, and I've been saying it for a while, Will, you're probably sick of hearing me say, I just think he needs to just slow it down just slightly and get a bit more control of his body shape going in. My big worry is that I think he might get a bit of a ban for this. Was it Tommy Bowe was saying that he reckons they need to kind of, he's probably in line for a big ban for this. And I really hope that's not the case. Like, I don't know if there's much malice in it, but I think at some point you've got to have a duty of care for the players around you. And you've got a responsibility to be, in control going in there. So I think he's got a bit of thinking to do on his game on it. I think he's too good a player to be kind of making an error like that in a big game. And I'd like whoever's telling him to do it. I think it seems like he's been told by the coaching staff to do it, to try and push players back inside, kind of with that really big line speed. I'd like them to have a reconsider about what they're doing with it. I think it's very, very high risk, and I think it's a risk that you don't need to take for a number of reasons that I've just explained now. So yeah, that's kind of why I've been passionate about the Gary thing. I'm glad, it's nice to be able to actually have a forum to discuss it with a bit of time and space. Rather than the kind of shorthand on on Twitter. But yeah, and nice to get the moment to talk about the red card thing. I think it's like the bad thing is that we've had to adopt this rule, but it sounds like nearly no one in the northern hemisphere really wants it. I'm just really surprised we've had to adopt it, and I feel really bad for Wales. I think they felt the brunt of it now, and that would have been a big lift for the Welsh game there if they won that game in the weekend, which I think they probably could well have done the way they were playing and the way Ireland were playing when it was 15v14. So yeah.
Yeah, I can't imagine. Like, does even like the most ardent supporter of this rule think that like how it played out on Saturday is that a just sporting outcome? That Gary Ringrose makes a mistake, gets a red card, and then we like a team.
I suppose for balance, well, like the idea behind it, I don't agree with it, but it's these ones where a player gets his timing wrong. It's like Gary Ringrose didn't go out to take Ben Thomas's head off. He got his timing wrong. There was a slight dip at the knees. It's that orange card. It's kind of in between. It's not felt like so. There's a straight red still there for if you go out and deck someone, you're gone. You're gone a straight red. There's no 20-minute red card if you go and headbutt someone or you deck someone or you bite someone or you gouge someone. This is brought in because we saw it in the New Zealand Test series in 2022 when Tauvo was an on Porter. There was a late movement, but it went head on head, and the player got his technique wrong and he made a mistake and he injured or he had a head collision, endangered a rival an opposition player. But he didn't go out to do them. And the idea is you're punishing the player for the poor technique by giving him 20 minutes off, potentially, 20 minutes. He's gone and he's probably going to get a ban, but you're not punishing the team for what is a technical error. And that's the idea behind it. I don't agree with this. That's, I suppose, just to bring the idea, the concept behind it. And in Ringrose's case, he made a mistake, but he didn't go out to hurt. Well, he's trying to hurt the problems every time he tackles them. That's the way he tackles. But he's not going out to, it's not an act of foul play in the traditional sense of foul play. It's the laws have changed over the years to outlaw this and to become more stringent on it. So that's the thinking behind it.
Can I say one thing on that rule? I think it's quite important, right? Because when he goes back to the bench, right, he obviously thinks he's got a yellow card. And you can see, I don't know, like someone obviously ruffles.
I thought it was yellow, personally.
No, yeah. But so he goes back to the bench. It's a yellow card, right? Someone ruffles his hair, and he kind of laughs. And I was like, sorry, that's obviously what I was like. Oh, I'm on Twitter now. I'm like, not happy with this. I think the bit that gets it for me, right, is that you have to realize. So he doesn't realize the kind of significance of it because the guy's got up. He's able to shake his hand, and you can see Gary's not. There's no nasty. Like it's not a nasty thing. It's just he's out of control. He's trying to do the right thing. He's trying to do the right thing by the team. But there seems to be a disconnect between your responsibility in doing that and actually doing it correctly for the opponent's sake as well. Like, so to my mind, that's where the disconnect is. And I'm kind of saying to myself, I was like, do you realize what you've done here? Like, you can go out with the best intentions in loads of facets, in every walk of life, but you have to understand what you're doing, and the possible implications of it. You know what I mean? And I think it's in that world. I'm like, like no one goes out to when you go out on a car trip, like you don't go out to hurt someone in the car. But if you look at your phone for 2 seconds or whatever, and you hit someone in the car, like to my mind, it's in that kind of world. Like no one's going out to do anything wrong here, but you make a big mistake here. It's a lack of focus, a lack of attention to detail. And the implications of it are kind of far-reaching, like
Yeah, I'm with you, Luke. Like I agree with I'm not disagreeing with Rudd. I'm disagreeing with the rationale he put forward because that is the rationale for the rule. But I just don't agree with the notion that like timing issues therefore exempt players from suffering consequences or exempt teams from having to suffer the consequences. Like Gary Ringrose plays for Ireland, he doesn't play for Gary Ringrose. So the idea that let's punish a player and not punish a team. That's not how these things work. If Gary Ringrose drops a ball that leads to a try, that the team suffers.
It also invariably favors stronger nations with more depth because they have better players on their bench.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, exactly. That's a great
like
point as well. Yeah.
if there's a Welsh 20-minute red card, you're not getting Bundyaki's quality off the bench. The player they're bringing on is not as good as him. Whereas in Ireland's case, as it will be with South Africa, with New Zealand, with France, probably with England as well, you're getting a player potentially of better quality because some teams are, Ireland are currently rotating their centres every game. I think Aki was going to start against France no matter what because he's in such prime form at the moment and he's so physically dominant. So I think it's like when they increased the number of subs in football that you were allowed to bring on. It favoured the teams with better squads, and this favoured.
Yeah, but interested to see if it's kept on because as far as I know, it's just being trialed. Like, so it might not necessarily be in for next year's Six Nations. So I don't know if this incident makes it more likely to be kept or more likely to be cut. I guess it'll depend on the backlash or what people
I
make.
think when you have Irish supporters saying it, Will, like we're all like, as much as we are trying to be unbiased when we look at a game and say that was great, this is, and try and just remove that kind of Irish tilt. Like we have it, and everyone here thinks, God, that didn't feel right.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess it's
a
good thing actually that we're coming from it.
Yeah,
like not that if it happened the other way and we were like giving out, because Ireland lost. It's actually like Ireland have won, Ireland have benefited. They could still go on and win the Six Nations because of this. But that's why it almost feels even more acute for us because it's like that didn't feel, as you said, if something doesn't feel right, you kind of just know it in your gut. And I think that was one of those cases. We might move on because you could discuss this kind of topic for a fair bit of time. Rud, Sam Prendergast's performance has got a lot of attention. He had some great moments. The 50-22 leading up to what proved to be the key try in the second half was really good. He nailed that long penalty after Bundyaki got that turnover to make it a 6-point game. But there was some mixed moments as well. He followed that penalty by kicking it out in the full. A couple of poor missed tackles. I think he missed 8 of his 16 tackles. So that's a 50% completion rate, which isn't good. So that was an area where he maybe struggled a bit. And he played the entire 80 minutes at out half as well, which was interesting. I was fully sure at half time that we might see Jack Crowley early in the second half, similar to the England game. That was my expectation, just watching the first half unfold. That didn't occur. Jack Crowley came on for the last couple of minutes, I think, and played in the backfield after Mac Hansen went off. So it was a very interesting and pointed, again, strategy from the Irish management to give Sam Prendergast all the game time and all the exposure. How do you think he played, and what do you make of that decision, I guess, not to give Jack Crowley some game time in the saddle at 10 when the game was very much in the melting pot?
I have to say, my instinct in the stadium was, and it's based on my concept coming into the whole tournament, that having that 1-2 punch of Prendergast and Crowley was going to be a big asset for Ireland in this tournament. I was fully sure they were going to introduce Jack Crowley. I thought the right call at the time was to bring Jack Crowley in because the game seemed to be getting away from Ireland, and what Crowley gives you that dynamism and punch that he showed in the England game and in the Australia game last November. And it was really telling, I think, that they gave Prendergast his second 80 minutes in a row, and that rather than reach for Crowley, they backed him. It just shows how highly they regard him and how it's his team now, and that what we saw in November was a strategic planning from Andy Farrell to put the bedrocks in place for this to be the way the team is run. And I'm not saying I agree with. I'm saying I think he should have made the change at the time. But as Simon Easterby said after the game, he was vindicated. That decision was vindicated. It was Prendergast 50-22 that led to one of the greatest kicks I've ever seen. Like it was such an amazing.
It was probably closer than you're aiming for, though, wasn't it?
If you're he pulled it off. Like, he's ambitious and he pulled it off, and it was such a play. Like, that's what he was going for. He spotted that space. I mean, I think Simon Easterby was saying it was such a ballsy call. Like, it was an amazing kick. The one that nearly led to Elliot Mee's try, or Ellis Mee's try, not so amazing. That the kind of one he shanked out on the full. So he did make mistakes, but he's there for those moments. He the clutch kicks that he nailed to make the game safe. What they were the kicks that were. So that's why he was still on the pitch. But there was definitely flaws in his game, and there was flaws in this game on Saturday. Ireland are definitely of the opinion that the good outweighs the bad, but France will be licking their lips with his one-on-one tackling, his first up tackling, and his role in the earlier try when he kind of he was all at sea in the in the defensive line. That's definitely a concern for Ireland. So it's I guess what the message to him is that this from the Irish management is this is okay. He's missing the tackles in the game, or he's getting run over, and they're leaving him out there for 80 minutes, and he's probably going to play against France. But I do think that if he wants to go to that next level, a lot of people, including Sam Warburton today, are talking about him as a starting test line in the summer. I think that the missing link in his game still is that first up tackling, because he's not a small player. He's, Alan Walters was telling us how powerful he is in the gym, how big he is in the gym. So I think it's a mindset thing, and he's going to have to start nailing those tackles. I mean, sometimes a bigger man runs at him like Jack Morgan. He is getting his body in the right place. He's pulling him down on top of himself, but it's more the ones in open country where he was being left for dead a little bit. That's what would concern you. Overall, I thought he had a massive influence in the game. He's a compelling figure to watch. And his big moments and his control, like Gibson Park, when the game was in the balance and Ireland had to work their way back, were very impressive. And a lot of his work in the first half as well was very, very good. But when the game got away from them, he had a role in that, and there were errors. Like if me had scored that try, if he grounded that ball, we would have all come back to that miscued kick out in the full, and we'd have a much more ferocious discussion about whether Crowley should have come on. So it was mixed. But I think the Ireland management are still very happy with what they're seeing from him. And I think Jack Crowley's in a very uncomfortable position now, because he has a right to go in and say, hang on a second, like when am I going to get a shot here?
Yeah, Luke, I'm just a little perplexed as to why Sam Prendergast warrants this sort of treatment. I feel like he's getting like special treatment that like I've not seen other out halves get. Like, yes, Jack Crowley played every minute of the Six Nations last year, but there was some different circumstances in the sense that, well, one, there wasn't a compelling backup that Jack Crowley is now, but two, a couple of times Ireland went 6-2. A few times Kieran Frawley had to play fullback because there was an injury to Keenan, and on another occasion, Frawley had to come off the bench after 5 minutes and Twickenham, so it wasn't a like-for-like comparison, so I'm kind of parking that. But, like, Sam Prendergast played, about 58 minutes to an hour against England, and Crowley played really, really well. And then in the last two games, Prendergast has gotten every minute at number 10, despite on Saturday, as Rudd outlined there, quite a mixed outing. I'm just like Johnny Sexton had to compete, Ronan O'Gara had to compete. Dan Carter started his career moving between 10 and 12 because he was competing. Johnny Wilkinson was the same. I just don't really get why it's like there's new rules for Sam Prendergast, and even in a game where 99 times out of 100, the replacement out half gets to come on and change things because the starting out half wasn't doing quite enough. And I understand Ireland won the game, but to me, that doesn't necessarily vindicate the decision either. I don't think that's the way I would look at it, because while he did pull off that great 50-22, he followed it up with a pretty bad error that almost, as Rudd said, lead to a try. So the idea that Crowley couldn't have come in and done better than that, I don't necessarily agree with that. So what do you make of it? I'm just kind of a little perplexed by how it's being managed.
Yeah, I'm probably not as perplexed by it now as I was at the start. I think I kind of agreed with keeping him on there. So I it's weird. I kind of took a different view on that kick. So you can tell, that? So he has that brilliant 50-22, like fantastic, right? But then he obviously the one we're all talking about is that kick dead, right? But I would be keeping. They're the kind of moments that I'm keeping him on for, because if you look at how he sets up for the kick, he thinks he's got way more time than he actually does, and he ends up kind of getting caught, having to check back in, and he gets all squeezed up in his technique, and then obviously squirts a bad one out in the full. They're the moments that you kind of want him learning and going, you don't have that time in international rugby. Do you know kind of way? So I was kind of saying, well, that's a useful moment for him. That's a teaching moment. And I kind of think, that's he's had a few of them so far in the competition. I was like, if you're going to stick with him, I think they're probably the moments that you want from him. I feel like they've decided he's the guy, which is very, very clear now. If it wasn't clear to anyone, it's very, very clear now after the weekend. And given his age, given his physical makeup, keeping him in the games for longer, he'll discover more about himself that he needs to kind of get better at. And you can clearly see, I think, I've been particularly impressed by the ball handling. I don't love some of the decisions that you've heard me kind of criticize maybe sometimes that, he's throwing those kind of skip passes and things a little bit too early. But God, like some of the intricate play, like I've been really, really impressed with that. Like you can see he's got really silky skills, and he can definitely take the team to high places, I think. So he's worth having the shot on. What I wouldn't have agreed with is how this transition has happened before now. Do you know that kind of way? Like I was thinking, well, how is he? Like, how did he get the last couple of games in November? Like I thought it was very clear that Jack Crowley came on and was actually very good in those games in November. Um, and I thought it was a mistake by Munster not to pick him for the head-to-head, but he goes ahead, like Prendergast goes down to Munster and has the man of the match. And then it's, to my mind, it's nearly all sewn up for the first game of the Six Nations, unless he has a complete blow for Leinster in the cup afterwards. So, yeah, I look, to me, this is kind of, once he got selected for the first game, I kind of knew where their head was at with it. And I haven't been surprised subsequent to that, Will, even though I think,
Were you not surprised on Saturday, though, that there wasn't like Jack Crowley didn't get like 15 minutes? That like
no, I'd have stuck with him. Like if he's your guy, like I think I wasn't worried about him seeing out the game. I thought that was a bad mistake he made, but I thought, as I said, I thought that was kind of a learning moment, and I think there was plenty like that. The team should be able to recover from that. Like the team still gave up an opportunity, like a try scoring opportunity. Like that wasn't all, like, out halves and kickers make mistakes here and there. Like that happens. You have to adapt and overcome. And they didn't do that well. So yes, it was a bad mistake by him, which kind of starts the process, but you have to be able to recover it afterwards. And I actually thought he was controlling the game quite well. He was in a good place. You could see he was, his ball handling and his decision making was good. You kind of want him to have more of those experiences in the melting pot now than not, and it makes him a better player. If he's the guy you think is taking you forward, which, like, I think it's very clear that they think that was the perfect time to be keeping him on. Like I would have kept him on there, like, let him work through a difficult patch.
Yeah.
So,
like,
yeah.
When I say I'm perplexed, as in I obviously understand the decision has been made and I understand the rationale. I guess I'm more perplexed that, like, Prendergast still would have been playing an hour in Cardiff in a very tough environment. So the idea that by making a change you're somehow like not letting him see himself through a tough period, that's not what I don't buy, because I'm like, he got to play an hour in a tough environment. You don't need to play every single minute to get like full value for this learning curve.
Will
championship minutes?
Will, it's not about
championship minutes. Like
they're
different. Last 20 minutes is different.
Let's
Sorry, Will, go on.
Sorry, I just think they obviously, like, Ireland are out there to win a Six Nations and a Grand Slam. This is not about Sam Prendergast. Simon Easterby, sitting in the coaching box, thought that Sam Prendergast was the better option to win the game for Ireland. That's the fundamental truth of it. It was strategic. They weren't sitting in that coaching box with 20 minutes to go or half an hour to go going, do you know what, let's just give Sam another half an hour for his own development. They want to win the match. Yeah. And they'd whipped him off straight away if they thought he wasn't the right option. And as I said, I was sitting in the ground going that it's time for Jack Crowley. Let's because I do think that 1-2 punch of him coming on, and he's a different kind of player, and he changes the picture for Wales. I think they could have won the match either way. But Simon Easterby, and this is the way they've been moving for a while. They clearly have made it. They feel like he's a special player who has big clutch moments within him. They gave Jack Crowley the opportunity last year. To the naked eye, from the outside observer, it looked like he took it. But behind the scenes, there was obviously something missing because they've moved on from him pretty quickly. It was very clear to us that we're kind of in and around the camp in November that Farrell had lost faith in him as a starting 10. It seems like it's deeply unfair from the outside. I know a lot of people don't agree with it. And it seemed to be very sudden in the way that it happened. But I think it was a sense they had towards the end of the Six Nations into the South Africa tour. They take him off for the first time in Durban. Frawley comes on and kicks the drop goal. They take him off early against New Zealand. They've clearly identified Prendergast as their man. And now they feel like if they want to win games, they need him on the pitch. And that's a really hard place for Jack Crowley to be in. And I'd say he left Cardiff like knowing that he has so much work to do to regain the ground that he's lost. I think they would have won the game with Crowley on the pitch as well. But these people know a lot about rugby, and they see that these two players every day, and they rate Sam Prendergast so highly, and they've clearly lost a bit of faith in what Jack can do in these games.
That's a
and
great
he has
point.
to win
Honestly,
that faith.
That's the best I've seen anyone explain it, because I think that's so on the money. Like, I just think they think he's obviously unbelievable. They obviously do, and I've talked to some of the guys. Apparently, in training, like, there is a difference in apparently what you see, So maybe that's what's really deciding it for them. Like, I do think, though, like, some of the defensive stuff and that, like he's creating a problem for himself. He has got, like, people are going to now be focusing on it, going, well, 50% will run down there. Like, do you know what I mean? That guy can't tackle. So, like, that's
you can be sure France have that big red line underneath his name, and they've got a lot of good ball carriers and a lot of they can't hide him out there, so he's got to stand up in that like the Grand Slam's on the line in 2 weeks' time, and that's like when France are profiling Ireland, they're going to be honing in on that and going after him repeatedly, and he's got to stand up to it. He's got to be better than he was last Saturday.
We'll now be in a situation, or Ireland will be in a situation whereby, like, if Jack Crowley is needed against France, it'll be the first weekend in February was the last time he got meaningful game time. Like, because I thought that was a good explanation, but I would question whether there wasn't an element of Sam Prendergast's development as well in the coach's mind. I really think that was part of it. I know you say it was purely winning on Saturday.
I don't like there was obviously an element of development around Saturday in that they made 7 changes, gave Jack Boyle his debut. They started Thomas Clarkson. They did make some, they risked the win to experiment a bit and get experience into Jamie Osborne. So there was a bit of that. But when it came down to it, there was a Grand Slam on the line. There was the Six Nations title on the line. There was like a historically bad defeat on the cards. There were 25-point favorites in this game. They're not leaving Sam Prendergast out there just to get a bit of experience under his belt. They're thinking of how can we win this match. I really do think that. They're obviously investing heavily in Prendergast, and they've decided to do this from the outset. And part of it is with 2027 in mind. But right now they think Sam Prendergast is the best 10, and they thought. I think if they thought it would win them the game, they would have got Crowley onto the pitch.
I'm going around. I'm kind of repeating myself, but I guess my point ultimately is that he was having such a mixed performance that any other out half, to my mind, in international rugby would have been replaced for a guy of Jack Crowley's quality.
But the coaches have faith in what he can do. I'm not saying it was the right call, but the coaches have incredible faith in what he can do, and they want to have their best players on the pitch towards the end. I also, you got to remember Crowley was covering the backline positions as well. He ended up coming on for Mac Hansen, who was cramping up. So maybe they were reticent to burn a sub when maybe Prendergast's numbers were looking really good. And the other element of his game that I think he has over Crowley, and which was really key to the way they won the game, his kicking game is better. His long kicking is really important to the way Ireland want to play right now. I thought the kicking game of Gibson Park and Prendergast was what won Ireland the game. They got Wales back. They wrested control of the game back, partly due to their physicality at the breakdown, but also because they played the game in the right areas. They started pinning Wales back with those long kicks. And I think he's a better kicker than Crowley. Crowley's got other elements. He's more powerful. He's a better tackler, definitely. But in terms of his long kicking, his strategic kicking, he's better in that right way. So they obviously felt that was their path to the win. But as I said, in the stadium at the time, I thought they should have brought on Crowley, and I disagreed with the decision. But the Ireland coaches they are nailing their colours to the mast, and they're not hiding from it either.
Well, it's certainly an interesting talking point coming out of it, and I enjoyed that robust back and forth. All of us having a slightly different viewpoints on where the team are coming from. But yeah, it'll be fascinating to see how it plays out in 2 weeks' time when France come to town. Luke, anything else from the Ireland game you want to cover off? Anything that you thought was really good that impressed you?
I thought Osborne's high ball, he was very solid back there. I thought he had a very good game for the most part. I think I was really impressed with him. And I think that's probably his position, isn't it? Really, if it's not 12, it's probably 15, I think. And I think the problem for him is that where does he play for Leinster? And after that, you can clearly see he's got international quality. So yeah, that's the big worry for him, is that just where is he going to get the game time? But I was really pleased for him. I thought that was great, because he's kind of a bit of a mixed bag. Wasn't he on the wing a couple of weeks ago? Maybe a little bit longer, a couple of weeks ago now, but. For Leinster, and I just thought defensively he was a little bit shaky on the wing, and maybe hasn't got not as comfortable there. But geez, at full back, wow! I was so impressed with him. Thought Lowe again was he's just outstanding, isn't he? He's playing out of his skin at the moment. And when you consider he's just coming back from a fairly long layoff, and a calf injuries are not great for back three guys either. You don't want to be getting them. So he's been one of Ireland's best players, if not best player of the tournament so far, I think. What else? Yeah, I was pleased. I mean, it was good to see some front row guys getting a run out. I think that's important for the team to start developing some depth there. So look, I know they had a tricky day out at scrum time, but it seemed like it might have been the experienced guy that was maybe getting pinged, or the referee was interpreting Porter's positions or whatever. It was interpreted wrongly or against Ireland. But it was good to see some depth going in there where that's going to be a key area for the team. We talk about 27 and, Prendergast, I think Rhodes is probably right around the end of the game. They definitely felt he was the best guy to win the game, but he was in there certainly at the start of the game for development purposes. Do you know what I mean? Like, why else would you play him against Wales, I think, considering where they are? But it was great to see the other guys getting a bit of development too. And yeah, they come through a sweaty 1-1, with the win, which is great because the confidence remains high, but you've loads of work on. So I think it's the ideal scenario for Ireland now. Just got to get lots of guys back for that French game now. I think they're getting bodies back on their feet. We wait and see what the fallout is over the next couple of days in terms of injuries. But overall, I think great to get out of there with the win. And loads of learning. That'll humble that team big time, I think.
Yeah.
Just on the scrum.
I
Sorry,
was
can I
actually
jump
about to
in
ask
from
about the
Will?
scrum, so yeah, you take it away.
No worries. Like you said that at the start, I actually wrote it down just to come back to it. You said it was a dominant Welsh performance at the scrum. I don't agree with that. Ireland were the dominant team to me, and they have a perception problem. And Andrew Porter has a perception problem with English referees, and it comes from Wayne Barnes, and it cost Ireland the World Cup quarter final. Like, that the scrum, the scrum penalties that went against Ireland in the first 10 minutes to 15 minutes of that game got New Zealand on the board, gave Ireland something. Ireland had to chase the game back, and they are convinced that they were the dominant team in that game and that the decisions against Andrew Porter were wrong. And here we are 2 years later, and Porter's starting, and Christoph Ridley, who cites Wayne Barnes as his major influence on his career, who just spent 2 weeks. He's been describing the Telegraph as England's secret weapon during the Six Nations, Christoph Ridley. And here he is reffing Ireland Wales, which I think is an interesting look. But he spent the whole week in reffing England in camp. But he's reffing Porter and Clarkson. I think it was 2 each off the park. Unfortunately, the TV coverage, like, they missed one scrum completely because they were having a close up on Gareth Anscombe with no replays. The previous one, we missed the initial one because they were showing Thomas Williams while the scrum was going on. At least they showed a few replays on that one. But to me, and I spoke to a senior front row, or sorry, a former front row on Saturday night, who said Porter's so dominant that the tight head is playing against can't cope with his power, and he folds in. And because Porter's the bigger man, almost, he ends up at an angle because he's won the hit, he's won the collision, and he's getting folded in himself. And the picture it paints is really bad, but he's actually the more powerful player.
Like, I've heard that before, that Porter is so dominant. Referees just don't understand how dominant he is. Like that sounds like a ridiculous thing to think or to say. And like, surely it's a Porter problem. Like, it's not up to Porter.
I think he's holding back. I think he's been holding back, and maybe I'm not sure what. I think also Wales went in, but Adam Jones was brought in as a scrum consultant for this window. Smart operator, good coach, and I'm pretty sure there was a bit of dark arts. Like Dan Sheehan was saying, look, they were probably smarter than us. I'm pretty sure Wales were collapsing while presenting better pictures as they did it. Like, there's ways and means of doing that. They brought in better scrummaging props as well, and also we had a very inexperienced tight head on the tight head side, and Thomas Clarkson, which probably just weakened them to some degree. But I really, watching those scrums, and I've watched a few of them a lot of times since the weekend, Ireland looked like the better scrummaging team on Saturday, and we're getting the reward for that. And that's John Fogarty, and needs to get his dossier together and go to World Rugby. They need to change this perception that's out there, driven by Wayne Barnes a couple of years ago, but it's lingering over Porter. He's not getting the reward for his own dominance. He's out scrummaging guys he's against, and he's getting penalties against them. It's an issue
Can I ask
for
you
them.
though? So,
but what does that mean? He's out
like,
scrummaging guys.
sorry, if I think about the Irish, like, I don't see Ireland like smoking another scrum. Now maybe I'm just thinking about like driving another team off is like, maybe that's like the ultimate. Maybe there's a version where you're destroying someone where you get an edge. It's just a slight edge. You know what I mean?
I think Porter's having to hold back. Like the first scrum against New Zealand, he gets dominance in Tyrell Lomax. Lomax folds, he follows through, and he gets done because he ends up at this angle. Like the only one they smoked on Saturday actually was Jack Boyle at the end. Like he against the replacement tight head, completely dominant in that one. I think they're actually holding back because they're afraid of if they are going full on, they're going to get done. And also they want to attack.
It's not a great look if you're destroying someone that badly. It always looks like you're walking it around, doesn't it? I always think you have to be. You can't just go gung ho. I don't think, unless you've got another guy, and unless the guy on the other side is going to be doing the exact same thing. I don't think that's a great look either. And you're nearly putting it straight in the referee's hands, where you're going to go, oh, who's someone wheeling, or whose arse is out, and who, this kind of stuff. Like, the obvious stuff. The one thing I'd say is like, is there any way he can control? Because obviously you got the forward background. Like, is there any way he can control the last picture? So if he is dominating, like I'm assuming the coaches have talked about this, but if he is dominating that much, and he's dominating to the extent where the last picture that the referee sees isn't a good one, is there no way he can control that last picture?
I think there is. I thought Wales were kind of cleverly collapsing it and kind of winning and buying the penalties. And I thought that the first one he just was way too quick to go to the stiff arm. I thought he could have just reset it, let them settle, and we would have had a much better contest at scrum time. Like scrums will come down, but they're so quick now to try and avoid resets because they do ruin the spectacle.
They're a
But
disaster.
it's
Yeah.
like to me, Ireland looked like the more dominant scrum, and it was Wales who got all the reward on Saturday. That's not the way it should be. So yeah, like I think he is trying to do that. I think he's not. We're not seeing the full potential of Andrew Porter, the scrummager, because he doesn't get any reward for it. So they've almost told him to try and just get stability and provide the ball. And if you feel like you really have him, go for it. But I think Wales were doing. There was a couple of tricks going on there where Wales were cleverly collapsing and buying the penalties because they knew that Ridley, and maybe they were briefing during the week, sending in pictures of what Porter looks like, and Ridley came in with an advanced perception. It was Nick Amish-Kelly who gave the first one against him, and Clarkson coughed up too as well, so it wasn't just on Porter. But I thought they were probably, I thought Adam Jones had a big influence, and the Wales were very smart about what they did there, and they have, hats off them. There's nothing wrong with that. That's what you do as a front row, especially when you're up against probably a better scrum. Like, Ireland have Joe McCarthy like scrummaging in the tight head lock position. Like they're going to be the more powerful scrummaging side against Wales. So Wales came up with kind of ways to negate that and got away with it. And hats off to them. But I'd say Ireland were pretty annoyed. And I'd say there's a big dossier going in this week. Like against France, it'll be very different because France will be the more dominant scrum, and Ireland will be the ones trying to cope and get it in and get it out. So it's a completely different game. But it cost Ireland big in that New Zealand game 2 years ago, and if they get an English ref in a World Cup quarter final again, it's going to be on their minds.
I think it's up to Porter though to come to the referees, not for referees to understand Andrew Porter's unbelievable scrummaging. It's like it reminds me of after the Doris Luke Pearce interactions when like Ireland were saying, "Oh, Luke Pearce was so wrong," but like Doris has to play the referee as well. If the referee is acting a certain way, Doris needs to react accordingly, and I think he's gotten a lot better in that.
I think that worked, Will. I think I think having a song and dance about that week worked because no referee has disrespected Caelan Doris since, and he has been treated as a much more substantive figure by refs since that Luke Pearce. So maybe they need to be shouting from the rooftops that Andrew Porter is the best scrummager in the world. I'm not saying he is, but they need to be saying, look at what we're doing, and refs aren't giving us a fair crack at the whip, because that will put pressure on refs to reward them. Look, if they're not working on, they are working on this behind the scenes. They surely are. It's got to be a focus for them because it's too big an influence on games. It's one of the reasons that Wales got into the game was because every time Ireland had a scrum, they were giving up a penalty. It was that in their handling. Like Dan Sheehan dropping the ball twice led directly to 10 points. So like they have to work on their own internal errors, but they also have to work on that perception with Porter, and also work on him to make sure he's as clean as a whistle. And he hasn't. I think he has improved. He doesn't get whistle off the park in every game. That's when it's an issue. But it just seems to be something with the Irish players and English refs.
It's not just English refs with Porter, though, is it, Rud? Like I feel like in other Champions Cup games,
mainly.
There's been other referees. Like at scrum time, he's had bother. I don't think it's not solely English refs, is it?
Not solely, but I'd say if you went, I saw Russ Petty put up stats on Andrew Porter's penalty concessions. I think it was against Wales, and it was quite high. But I'd say if you were, I'd like to see Andrew Porter's penalty concessions with English refs versus refs from other countries. I think there is a perception there that is feeding. I'm not saying it's a bias, but I think there is they all talk to each other, and they obviously have identified this, and I think it's gone against them over the years.
Well, especially in the Champions Cup, English referees get a lot of, like, say, Leinster versus French team games because they're obviously not from either country. So I guess maybe that in the round, it just means he's reffed by English referees probably a lot more than he would be from other countries. Okay, we're almost finished up, guys. We had England 16, Scotland 15 in the Calcutta Cup. Finn Russell missing 3 conversions. England getting another narrow win like the French game where they probably didn't deserve it, Luke. But what did you take away from that one? Like, when Duhan van der Merwe goes over in the corner at the end, you're thinking Scotland will maybe snatch it, but Russell's kicking was off all day and he couldn't make that one count.
God, yeah, it was a rough day, wasn't it? The referee is like, our game is so difficult to referee, like, but he made a few stinkers. Did you see the footage of him pushing Russell out like another 2 meters as well from where it should have been placed. Did you see that?
I did, yeah. That's a tough one,
Uh,
especially when it's such an acute angle. Like that makes a big difference when you're out in the
I
corner.
saw there are some real idiots. Sorry, I actually got dragged into the mire of X on the weekend. My own doing, of course, but I did see some of the stuff. Like someone was in passing, I saw something in on the Russell thing, and I was like, well, that doesn't really make a difference. An extra 2 meters from that position. I was like, that person has no idea about sports. Like that does make a difference. You're angled that far out. Look, I think the big story is that look, I think it's a win for England. It's not often they're winning a game and they're getting booed at different points for some of their tactics throughout the game. When they're putting up the box kicks, it was just look, it's negative enough play. I think Borthwick could probably say the ends will justify the means at this point, but I'm not sure that long term it's what it's what they want to be doing. I think they have to be a little bit more just a little bit more aggressive, a little bit more like trusting of their skills and kind of backing themselves in positions where maybe statistically it's not always the right thing to do, but you do have to have you do have to try and strike at teams. And I think the other tactics become more difficult. The kind of more turgid tactics that they're using, the kicking and that, become more difficult when you're no threat at all with the ball in hand. Like you still need to have a combination of both. You see where South Africa have gone the last year or two. I think they've realized that you can't just have the same tactics over and over again because teams start then figuring you out a little bit. You have to be able to attack with the ball in hand and be a threat there as well. And that's the next level for England with me. But I think it was good for them that they got the win. It's good for the competition. It makes it a bit of a sweaty finish next weekend. Obviously, 2 weekends time for Ireland now is very sweaty, given the way they gave up points against England in the first game. And from a Scotland perspective, look, it's a snatching defeat from the jaws of victory, isn't it? Again, like they should have won that game. Few dodgy decisions, definitely. But I think it's probably not that value add for Downsend in terms of where they are to be moaning that much about it. I think he's been in this position too many times where the team is in a position to win the game and can't get the job done. And at some point, you can't blame other things. You have to just look internally. And
Did you think Van der Merwe could he have made the angle a bit better? I saw people.
Maybe he could have, Will, but like I think the other argument is that like why would you go closer to an English defender if he dives in, if there's a foot in, or if there's something? I didn't have as much of a problem with that. Look, I felt the one thing I'd say is sometimes I give Russell a bit of a digging out because I just think he's a bit flary and he can be in the big games. Like Ireland always seem to get the better of Russell because he tries something or whatever, and he's just not that solid sometimes. But he's magic to watch, and his kicking has actually been really, really good for Scotland the last couple of years. I really felt for him missing those kicks. I thought, didn't really deserve that. He's a huge player for Scotland, very likable guy, and I was hurting for them. I was hurting for the Scotland team actually to not get the win. I wanted to see them get the job done. And yeah, it was unlucky. They were a little bit unlucky too, with a few weird things on it. So, I think what you'd probably say is a typical Scotland performance, Will, was it that they kind of had done lots of the hard work, but just couldn't get the job done. And yeah,
well, usually against England, they're good for that banker win. Like they were going for 5 in a row. When that try, which was a lovely little move in midfield, I thought fully sure that Russell was going to nail that conversion, even though he hadn't been kicking well. I just thought this is going to be classic. They're going to snatch it here, but as you say, it drifted by the post. And yeah, I agree with you. I don't think Van der Merwe had that much wiggle room to get that much closer. Like I saw some people being quite critical, saying he could have narrowed the angle, but when he puts that ball down, Tommy Freeman roars into the picture frame within a second. So I don't think there was this ocean of room. He could have made the angle substantially easier potentially. And we saw France beating Italy 73-24 yesterday. Just kind of Anton Dupont obviously to the fore. Some of the guys they brought in, Leo Barre was really good. BLBRA, which is now kind of a standard performance from him, was really, really good as well. And it kind of means that Ireland kind of have to win the Grand Slam more or less to win the Six Nations. So it makes that game in 2 weeks' time even more pressurized.
Yeah, it does. Just looking at the table, the points difference is really in France's favour, and they're only 3 points back. So even if Ireland do kind of lose with a bonus point and it's a 4-1 split, France have a massive points advantage going into isn't it a home game against Scotland in the final game? So it's you'd back them to. I mean, Scotland have a decent record against France, so it's the way these fixtures, it's all very weird. Ireland always beat Scotland. Scotland always almost, but they didn't do it this time, but they always play really well against England, and they're usually pretty close against France as well. So you wouldn't But like this Ireland team, they're scoring fewer points this season. I just don't see them putting up a cricket score against Italy. I know France did it yesterday, and I'm sure the Italians are like they didn't live up to their own expectations in that game. But I don't see Ireland running riot necessarily in Rome, even if they have to. And they're going first in Rome, so even if like they don't know what they're chasing, so they kind of it's a bit blind. So if we're going to get a scenario like 2015, I think all the eggs are in. Certainly France's basket, and England have a bit of work to do to get there as well. So it puts it all on next Saturday week, and this is kind of the France that we expected. Is the France looked like Toulouse and Bordeaux and what they've been doing in the Champions Cup, and maybe what they were on course to do the same in Twickenham had they held on to the ball a couple of times, had they not been so careless. They found the space in Twickenham that some of their attacking play was really, really good, and then either the final pass wouldn't go to hand or they were too sloppy and too careless. So they should be going for a grand. This should be a proper final. This should be two teams chasing a grand slam in Dublin in 2 weeks' time. France mucked up their opportunity, and Ireland haven't mucked up yet. They nearly did on Saturday, but to win it, they're going to have to produce their best performance. They need bodies back, like as Luke said. I think they expect Doris to be back. They say Kelleher should be back, and they're saying they're hopeful on Furlong, but I think with Furlong we have to see it before we believe it, because it's been so long. But it would help, and certainly in that scrum picture, even if he's just there to prop for 50 minutes and just be solid in that area, that's really the height of what we can expect from him at this point. That's gonna be great. It's gonna be a great build up. It was a tough build up to that Wales game, which ended up delivering a great game, but because Wales had been so poor, it was hard to kind of sell it. Whereas this one, there's gonna be no selling it. Like there's so many different talk points, some of the best players in the world coming to Dublin in 2 weeks' time to play. Winner takes it all effectively. It's gonna be absolutely brilliant, and it's such a great position for Ireland to be in. They're being chased, but they know what they have to do, and they just had a fairly patchy performance with 7 changes. So they know they can bring back experienced players, but they also know what they have to improve on. It's all set up for it. It's going to be a great couple of weeks.
Oh yeah, this game deserves the 2 week build up. I feel like the only downside is that it's the early game on the Saturday. I would like that 4:45 slot just to get that atmosphere up another notch or two. Not that it'll probably be needed because it's such a eagerly anticipated game. Last thing, Rod, before we wrap up, you were at the Ireland A England A game on Sunday as well in Ashton Gate and Bristol, and on paper it looked like a great opportunity for some guys to put themselves in the shop window for further involvement. Maybe not in this window, but certainly come the summertime when there's going to be a quasi development tour with the lines going on. But it turned into a pretty disastrous outing. It was raining heavily, I believe, and then Ireland had a raft of injuries. Those are people who might not have caught it. Could you give us a bit of a summary of what took place?
Yeah, I'm right about this afternoon. It wasn't, it was a weekend.
Have Munster got any players left, Rhodes?
It's not good. Like Shane Daly doesn't sound good at all. It might be his season, and that's a big blow. He's one of their most reliable players, and Ollie Yeager went off injured towards the end, and Dermot Barron went off after 4 minutes with a HIA and didn't return. So that's and they're already down numbers, so it's pretty grim. It's not great. Like Mike Prendergast had 2 hats on yesterday, and one of them was he's back with Munster today, counting the cost of this game he was coaching in yesterday. Like it was kind of a sobering reminder of how we can't be complacent about the strength of Irish rugby over the weekend, because the sevens teams didn't do well. The 20s lost in Newport on Friday night and ran into a brick wall. They had loads of possession and territory, but couldn't break Wales down. And then Ireland A, there was carnage. They lost both out halves to head injuries. Their hooker went off after 4 minutes, and Stephen Smith came on from Leinster, and he just didn't. His lineout was the disaster. But they were overpowered. Like it was really jarring how much more powerful the English players were. Won loads of big collisions, and like it was a 28-12 defeat. But really, like Ireland had to scramble, and they were on their own goal line for nearly the entire second half, and it took a half an hour for England to break them, which is a source of pride for them. But really, they couldn't get off their own goal line. It was impressive from a group of English players, and less so from the group of Irish players who had to endure difficult conditions and a lot of kind of chaos. Max Deegan finished the game on the wing, ended up getting sin bin for a penalty try towards the end for a deliberate knock on. So that was a reflection of how mad it was. Like Sunda brought Harry Byrne's career. Like they Daly goes off, Harry Byrne comes on, Kieran Foley has to shift to fullback, which kind of ruins the exercise from his point of view. Harry Byrne lasts 4 minutes and he has to go off for a HIA. Doesn't come back on. Then they lose Frawley in the second half. He's come back in. Then they end up with Nathan Doak playing 10. he was one of the bright lights. Nathan Oak was very good. Alex Candellin got a lot of praise from Prendergast. I thought the Jack Ainger, who had been in the Ireland senior squad, was very good. Their scrummaging was very good towards the start. So there were bright sparks. Some lads did themselves some credit. The two centres, Postlethwaite and Gavin, are both very good players, but really they didn't have the ball. It was terrible conditions. There was a really good shape to them in the first 10, 15 minutes, but they just didn't get their hands on the ball enough. And I'd say for the coaches who stayed in Bristol to watch it, they didn't get an awful lot out. I'd say they had high hopes for this fixture to try and find out more about a lot of players. Didn't get a lot out of it. So I'd say it was disappointing for the players, but also for the coaches. But they said, just to sum up, like the week in camp, being together, being Ireland players for the week, like that was a positive. And a lot of those players will be in Georgia and Portugal in the summer for that summer tour, when we're going to find out a bit more about them. And by November, one or two of them will probably be in the senior squad. So, yeah, it was frustrating. It wasn't a great spectacle.
Yeah, disappointing again to what was another fairly riveting Six Nations weekend, and now our attention turns to that Ireland-France game in 2 weeks' time, which is set to be an absolute cracker. But for now, I'd like to thank Rud and Luke for joining me on this week's episode of the Left Wing Podcast. We will be back next week to build up to that big game at the Aviva Stadium. So until then, thanks so much for listening, and goodbye.